901. The Truth of the Matter. After listening to Lan Ying's story, Mayer and Gong Yi both fell silent. When Lan Ying rejected him, Gong Yi just guessed, did Lan Ying and the pirates have any holiday? But he didn't expect that the festival would be so big, and he could understand why Lan Ying hated pirates. Mayer, Rocky, you all go to rest, I want to be alone for a while. Gong Yi was in a bad mood, so he said to Mayer and Rocky. Rocky and Mayer naturally saw Gong Yi's abnormality, but they didn't say anything, just nodded and agreed, and then went back to the house together. After Rocky and Mayer left, Gong Yi looked up at the sky and said nothing. Regarding Lan Ying, he has the attitude that he must take it away, so he will definitely find a way to take Lan Ying and go sailing together. I wonder who is the female pirate who ruined the little girl's family? Just when Gong Yi stared at the sky in a daze, a voice suddenly came from behind him. Gong Yi's thoughts were instantly disrupted, and when he looked back, he realized that it was Rayleigh. Teacher. Gong Yi nodded, expressing that he wanted to know, and politely called the teacher. When Rayleigh said this, his eyes became a little dignified, and then he said, pirates. But Rayleigh's words came out. After that, Gong Yi's eyes instantly widened, expressing that he couldn't believe this fact. If this pirate group is a pirate group, then there are too many doubts. Rocky said that Lan Ying's father, Hawk, left with him because of the beauty of the female pirate captain. But I am sure I can hook up with a beautiful woman. That's just the so-called fact that Lan Ying saw. In fact, Hawk will marry Lan Yu, which is completely instigated, a premeditated conspiracy. Rayleigh's expression became more and more solemn, and said, this matter, perhaps it is not impossible for Gong Yi to know Akatsuki. Seeing that Rayleigh was about to explain for himself, Gong Yi stopped talking, closed his mouth and stood there, obediently waiting for Rayleigh to start explaining. Actually, Lan Ying's mother, Lan Yu, is in existence with ancient abilities. Rayleigh sighed and started explaining the real truth to Gong Yi. Lan Yu and Rayleigh knew each other because they were young. Yu's life was saved by the Roger pirates. It was Rayleigh and Roger who sent Blue Feather to the Chambord Islands. Where Lan Yu was born was not the Chambord archipelago, but the Roger pirates met on an isolated island when they started their adventures on the Great Route. At that time, Lan was less than 7 years old. When Roger discovered Lan Yu, the isolated island had already been destroyed. The whole island was full of fire. Only in the center of the island, there was a huge egg. And this egg is the egg that gave birth to Blue Feather. The Roger pirates also witnessed the birth of Lan Yu. But when Lan Yu was just born, he was like a 7-year-old child, but they didn't know how old it was. Lan Yu also didn't know anything except his own name on the island and acted unknowingly. Lan Yu just stared at the sea in front of him, and then didn't know what happened. All the fire on the island disappeared. Rayleigh and Roger were also surprised, but when they asked Lan Yu just replied that they didn't know. The newly born Lan Yu, as if he has no heart, can't cry, can't laugh, and doesn't have the joys and sorrows that a person should have. Because their record pointers are not full, they can only continue to stay on this island, and during this time, they are always alone with Lan Yu. But no matter how they teased Lan Yu, how they tried to coax Lan Yu refused to laugh and looked paralyzed, which made it really uncomfortable for people to see. In this way, half a month has passed, and Lan Yu still hasn't laughed once. Looks like a sullen gourd, he doesn't even speak, and only speaks a few words occasionally. This kind of natural character makes her completely different from others. Over time, not many people on the boat would try to please Lan Yu, hoping to win her smile. In their eyes, Lan Yu is just disgusting. They, therefore, do not speak and have no expressions. They didn't go to the next island until Roger's record pointer was full. And at this time, the most helpless thing for them was Lan Yu. At that time, Lan Yu was still young, so naturally it was impossible for him to join Roger's pirate group. But Lan Yu always grabbed Roger and wouldn't let them leave. No matter how persuaded, no matter what, Lan Yu would not let them leave. They can't stay here for a long time, they can only take Lan Yu and continue their adventure. 1 month before boarding the ship, Roger did not admit that Lan Yu was a member of his pirate group, and only regarded Lan Yu as a child who was looking for a place to send him there. And all these changes, just a month later, in their battle with the Navy, Lan Yu had a different change. Please download Fei Lu's novel. See the latest chapter Baidu search 99 Play Companion to find 99 novels and LT. 902. A Different Blue Feather, Third More. At the time when Lan Yu was taken in, the Roger pirates were already well known, and when they left the island, they received greetings from the Navy. The Navy did not know how to do it, and quietly appeared beside them, although Roger and others easily escaped the pursuit of the Navy. But because of the first shelling by the Navy, they didn't notice, so almost everyone on the other side of the ship was badly wounded. A few people's injuries were so serious that even if it was the ship doctor, there was nothing they could do. Roger, who never wanted to give up his buddies, didn't want to hear that they were no longer saved. But Roger knew better than anyone else that they were helpless. Come and try. Just when everyone was depressed, Lan Yu, who was only 7 years old, squeezed out of the crowd and said to Roger. The first sentence Lan Yu said after getting on Roger's boat. For the first time, his eyes began to light up. Although he didn't know what the 7-year-old child could do, Roger nodded. What happened next surprised everyone. I saw Lan Yu stretched out his hand and touched the fatally injured crew member, and then a light appeared, and a miracle happened. The man's wound was healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. After the beam disappeared, the crew member, who should have been unable to survive, was sleeping like a normal person at this moment. No one expected this. However, after healing all the dying crew members, Lan Yu also changed. Originally 7 years old, she gradually became bigger in everyone's sight, and finally stayed at almost the same age as them. Roger pointed at Lan Yu. His eyes were full of doubts and surprises, and he didn't understand what was going on. Captain Roger, let me join your pirate group. Lan Yu did not answer Roger's question, but looked at Roger, smiled, and said. After Lan Yu said, Roger fell into silence. Originally, he did not intend to bring Lan Yu because of his young age, but now, he really wanted to take Lan Yu. However, after this series of surprises happened, Roger began to hesitate again. I can't remember why I'm like this, but I know that it hurts you, and I don't have a home either. Captain Roger, take me away. Lan Yu saw Luo Jia Yu. He didn't make any noise or trouble, but continued to beg. Roger was silent. What Lan Yu said was really nothing to be picky about, not to mention that she saved the life of his crew. After thinking for a while, Roger smiled, stretched out his hand to Lan Yu, and said, Roger Pirates, you are welcome. Everyone has no opinion on Lan Yu's joining. In this way, just 1 day later, Lan Yu, who was still paralyzed before, has now become a gentle and lively girl. This is also the first girl of the Roger Pirates. Lan Yu also became the ship doctor of the Roger Pirates, and just like that, the group began their adventure. Along the way, they didn't know how many times they were rescued by Lan Yu. They only knew that Lan Yu was like a god, dragging them back from the gate of hell many times. But as the ability was used day by day, Lan Yu became more and more strange. Since the beginning of the adventure, Lan Yu has been aging almost every day, and the rate of aging is almost twice that of ordinary people. But everyone in the pirate group doesn't know. Still regard Lan Yu as an invincible ship doctor, and they are more reckless in battle and don't care about their own lives, because they know that they have Lan Yu. Until that adventure to the Sky Island, everyone had a new understanding of Lan Yu. When they heard about the Sky Island, most people thought it was a legend, an island that didn't exist at all. But only Lan Yu didn't think so. When everyone believed that the Sky Island was a non-existent place, she stood up and refuted everyone. said that the empty island really exists, and she can lead everyone to find the empty island. After listening to Lan Yu's words, everyone was full of curiosity and believed what Lan Yu said. After that, they used the same method as when Luffy and the others went up, and flew to the Sky Island. On the way to the empty island, someone asked Lan Yu why he knew so much. Lan Yu was very at a loss for this question. To be exact, she didn't know why she knew it. It was just when they were discussing the empty island, the map of the empty island and the zoom to the empty island appeared directly in Lan Yu's mind. Why she knows the map to the Sky Island, she doesn't know. For those people's inquiries, Lan Yu also used what he heard and tried, but did not expect it to come true to prevaricate. This excuse was hidden from everyone, but not from Roger and Riley. In Lan Yu's eyes when talking about the empty island. Eyes can't deceive people. It turns out that this is not what Lan Yu has heard of, but what Lan Yu knows for sure. 903. Can't believe it. If Gong Yi remembered correctly, when Roger was on the Sky Island, Anahu hadn't gone to the Sky Island, so the Sky Island at that time should be considered peaceful. This question, Rayleigh also answered Luffy. Of the island is indeed very peaceful. But by coincidence, at that time, the pirate group was also on the Sky Island. Two pirate groups can be said to be facing each other directly. Rayleigh and Roger also learned later that they followed their own methods and flew up. Although the strength is not weak, in the face of Roger, it is much inferior, whether it is young or old. The pirate group, without a doubt, lost to Roger. Roger didn't hit the dead hand, but let go, and they watched to leave the empty island with their own eyes. After driving away, the Roger pirates began their adventure in the sky. Just like when Luffy came, Roger also found a historical text, but this historical text was not the text that Luffy saw. This is another. As to why there is this, whether this is a real historical text, no one knows Akatsuki. But they can understand, and the historical text of self-love is written about one of the 7 ancient weapons, Michael. By Michael as the savior, the angel who saves everything. That this weapon Michael possesses is that it can bring people back to life, and can revive and heal before dying. But relatively speaking, the side effect is that it will reduce their lifespan. Contrary, Michael is immortal, only to save people's life, or to be killed. And right below that historical text, all Michaels are listed. The ancient weapon Michael is not a real weapon, but a kind of power, which will be passed down from generation to generation. Who possesses this power can be called one of the 7 ancient weapons, Michael. Of the people on the stone are all blue, and the name at the bottom is Lan Yu. Seeing this scene, everyone was shocked. Lan Yu, an ancient weapon. For a while, everyone hadn't resolved this matter. You must know that the 7 ancient weapons are weapons that everyone wants to get, and it is said that as long as one is needed, they can occupy the entire world. But no one could have imagined that Lan Yu would actually be one of the 7 ancient weapons. But what makes them unacceptable is the side effect. Every time they use energy, their life will be reduced. Roger didn't know if Lan Yu knew about this, he just grabbed Lan Yu and kept asking why. 4. Ancient weapons. Roger is not interested. What makes him sad the most? It was Lan Yu who kept it from her for so long. Looking at the records in the historical text, Roger was completely shocked. It turned out that they were able to stay safe for so long because Lan Yu used his lifespan in exchange for it. These things, you know. In the historical text, translated it for her, and asked. At this moment, he hoped that Lan Yu could answer that he didn't know. However, Lan Yu just nodded. Roger and Riley already knew that Lan Yu knew everything, but he didn't tell them anything, and still used his lifespan to respond to their nonsense. Since you all know, why don't you say that you are afraid that we will know that you are an ancient weapon and will embarrass you, or that we will feel that you have not abandoned you? Roger couldn't accept this fact, looked at Lan Yu, his body trembled uncontrollably, and then asked again. Lan Yu shook her head. She knew her abilities, but he didn't know that he was a so-called ancient weapon, and he didn't know what an ancient weapon was. In Roger's unbelievable eyes, Lan Yu hesitated to speak, and after thinking for a while, said, "My life is saved by you." But after hearing this sentence, Roger felt a little amused and said, "So you are going to pay us back with your life?" Roger guessed right. Lan Yu didn't speak, just clenched his fists and nodded, not knowing what to say. "Do you really treat us as partners? You hide everything from us." Rayleigh couldn't stand it anymore, no longer had the smiley face he used to have, and asked Lan Yu seriously. Raleigh's serious looks are rare, he's a laughing man, and if he suddenly changes his expression, then it's a sign that things are serious. 4. Lan Yu's concealment, he is undoubtedly very angry. Raleigh's words came out, Lan Yu became anxious in an instant. His face, which had no expression at all, suddenly became anxious and shook his head desperately. She has been on Roger's ship for a long time, and has feelings for Roger and this pirate group. Rayleigh had asked this question at the beginning, he would not have shook his head, she would have nodded, admitting that she did not regard them as partners. But after so long, she has fallen in love with this pirate group, and she really regards herself as a member of this pirate group. 904. Move on. The original Lan Yu was useless, and Roger was still willing to let her on board. She was very moved. "I also wanted to repay Roger's kindness, so I did such a thing." She was also afraid that Roger would not accept her repayment, so she chose to hide it. But she never thought that when she waited for Roger and others to go to the Sky Island, she also sold her own secret. Lan Yu thought that Roger and Riley would be happy, but she still underestimated the character of Roger and Riley. Lan Yu knew that he was a lifesaver for this pirate group. But she never thought that what Roger cared about was not her ability, but her. "I'm sorry." Lan Yu lowered his head, not knowing what to say, so he could only keep apologizing. But for Lan Yu's answer, Roger didn't accept it and didn't say a word. "If I say, I want you to leave our pirate group, what do you want to say?" After a moment of silence, Roger raised his head, looked at Lan Yu and asked. But after Roger's words were finished, it was not only Lan Yu who was surprised, but also the entire pirate group. "Captain, although it's wrong for Lan Yu to hide from us, she's doing it all for us. It doesn't need to be serious enough to let Lan Yu get off the ship and leave." One of the pirates couldn't stand it any longer, so he raised his head, looked at Roger, and said, "Shut up." Roger didn't say much, just threw the man a word to shut up. The crewman looked at Roger's angry look, and fear filled his heart for a while, and suddenly he couldn't say anything, full of fear, so he had to shut his mouth and return to the queue. "Answer me." Seeing that Lan Yu remained silent, Roger raised his head, looked at Lan Yu who was bowing his head and said nothing, and asked. Lan Yu's body began to tremble. Roger was not joking when he looked like this, and then said, I don't want to leave, please." Lan Yu understood that her behavior was really hurting Roger's trust, but in any case, she didn't want to leave. "It's okay if you don't want to leave, but your ability is not allowed to be used again in the future. Unless you get off my ship, as long as you are a member of the Roger Pirates, you can't use this ability once." 2. Seeing that Lan Yu didn't want to leave, Roger hooked the corner of his mouth. The plan succeeded, and then continued. "But I can't be silent on Roger's pirate group, otherwise, what's the use of her? He can't fight, can't cook, see, and can't heal. If the ability is forbidden, she is on this ship, isn't she a dragging existence? Let Seth teach you medicine, used to be a ship doctor, but you are not allowed to use ability." Roger had long expected Lan Yu to say this, and then replied. Seth was the only ship doctor on their ship, but because he was alone, he would be very tired every time the war ended. If Lan Yu was willing to help, that would be great. "Okay, I promise you." Lan Yu nodded and agreed to Roger's request. "Can't use her ability, then she doesn't need to. She just wants to stay on this boat now, and doesn't want to leave the big guy." Seeing that Lan Yu agreed very simply, Roger nodded in satisfaction. He didn't want his partner to sacrifice his life for himself, so he knew that Lan Yu didn't have the ability. It is impossible for Lan Yu to disembark. Seeing that Lan Yu had agreed to the request and didn't have to leave, everyone shouted happily. Being together for such a long time, they also have a lot of feelings for Lan Yu, so when Lan Yu might leave, their hearts almost hung up. But when Lan Yu didn't have to leave, they were also happy. In this way, Lan Yu began to follow Seth to learn medical skills, and also began to stop using his own abilities. As for Lan Yu as an ancient weapon, everyone has not mentioned a word. Because they knew that if they told this matter, it would definitely be a big disaster for Lan Yu. After all, there is a saying in the legend, with ancient weapons, you can occupy the world. Has ambitions, but not everyone has a good heart, so this secret was kept hidden after all. When Lan Yu didn't use the ability at the beginning, everyone was not used to it. After all, they were all desperate with people before, and suddenly, they had to be careful, and naturally there would be some restraints. This is also the case, causing most of the pirates to start to look down on the Roger pirates. Before this, Roger's pirate crew had an evaluation that the crew were all lunatics and would rather die than win. But Lan Yu doesn't have the ability, so they can't be this lunatic. So the current Roger pirates, almost 10-10 will be attacked. News. The news of the great changes in the Roger pirates was also reported, which undoubtedly made the current Roger pirates worse. It's all my fault. Lan Yu looked at the reports on the report and the attacks from outside pirates in the recent period, and felt guilt in her heart. If it weren't for her, how could the Roger pirates be on the cusp of the storm? Fei Lu reminds you, 3 things to read, collect, push and watch the latest chapter. Baidu search 99 playmates, find 99 novels and LT, or block the collection of IP. 905, Battle of the Navy. But for Lan Yu's self-blame, Roger didn't say anything, just patted her on the head, expressing that he didn't blame her. In fact, to be honest, if it wasn't for Lan Yu's credit, they wouldn't have such a big reputation now. Although there are too many pirates chasing them now, there are even more than a dozen pirates attacking them every day. But the abilities of those pirates are very general, and it is a dream to beat them. Moreover, now Lan Yu has learned medical skills from Seth, so that their injuries have been dealt with in a timely manner, and there is no major problem. Speaking of which, they also want to thank Lan Yu, not blame. We still have a long way to go, and it also saves us from going to them. Well, don't be downcast, be happy, our voyage will continue. If it's really sad, just follow Seth, study medicine. Roger sat down, looked at the frustrated Lan Yu, and comforted. Roger's comfort is not chicken soup for the soul, nor is it enough. Gentle, but it makes Lan Yu very moved for a while. That is to say, from this time on, Lan Yu decided that in the future, he will definitely study medicine and make more contributions to the Roger pirates. It was also from this moment that Lan Yu identified the Roger pirates. This is her whole life home. Of studying medicine desperately, Lan Yu has become an amazing and unbelievable ship doctor. Seth looked at Lan Yu's growth and was amazed. After more than 10 years of hard work, Lan Yu surpassed himself in half a year. Although a little unwilling, but more still admiration and envy. But what Seth didn't know was that Lan Yu didn't do anything in the past 6 months, and his mind was full of medical skills. Even in meals or even in dreams, all thoughts are about medicine. Gradually, fewer and fewer people attacked the Roger pirates, and in the end, many people even feared Roger's pirates. It can be said that it is necessary to hide. Occasionally a few naval warships came to ask for trouble, and he was able to deal with it calmly. However, on this day, another naval warship came to attack them. This time it was a Navy colonel. Yes, it was the army led by Garp. It was also the first time Karp and Roger met. At the time, Karp was eager to move up the ranks, hoping to one day be able to get there. At this time, he happened to hear about the notoriety of the Roger pirates, so he challenged it. When he fought Garp for the first time, Roger also felt incredible about Garp's strength. To doubt, how could Garp's ability be just a colonel, but he was a colonel, no one knew the reason. Although Garp was very powerful, he was defeated by the Roger pirates in the end. The Roger pirates should have been able to destroy their entire warship, but Roger didn't, and he gave Garp a way out. Garp didn't appreciate it or even thanked him, but before leaving, he still left a message for Roger: "I will definitely take you back." Roger just smiled and responded with, "I'm waiting." However, the day after Garp left, an admiral's ship suddenly appeared beside the Roger pirates. When it was discovered that the comber was an admiral, almost everyone screamed badly, and it wasn't no one doubted that it was Garp's secret. In fact, Garp doesn't know anything and is recovering from his injuries in the hospital at this moment. "Roger, give you a chance, follow me obediently, or the whole pirate group is ready to be destroyed by me," Admiral Nyan asked. But Roger didn't answer Nyan's question, he just laughed lightly, but in Nyan's eyes, this smile seemed so mocking and underestimating. "Do you think it's possible?" Roger looked at Nyan and wanted to laugh inexplicably. Nyan said can be said to be nonsense within nonsense. How could a pirate go with the general willingly, and he offered a bounty? If he was arrested, he would either die or promote the city. It would be strange if he could go. "Then don't blame me, little ones, shoot." Seeing Roger's attitude, Nyan didn't need to continue talking nonsense. The two have the same idea, and the fight is over. Roger still knew the gap between the two sides, so when he decided to go to war, he did not underestimate the enemy, but was very cautious. In this way, the war between Roger and the admiral started here. Scale is particularly huge, but it can't be said to be a small battle. Because of Roger and Nyan, they had been entangled at sea for more than 3 days. Although Roger was a little inferior, he would not lose his life. In this way, the two of them each brought their own team and stood in a stalemate. After 4 days passed, this small-scale war ended with Roger winning and Nyan retreating. There is no answer to who of the two teams is more powerful. Roger's pirate group won the protracted battle mainly by being supported by 2 powerful ship doctors. As for the Navy, in the end, there was only one Nyan left. So if you want to insist that who is more powerful, or Nyan, he is just a fluke victory. 906. Disbanded pirates. But this battle made Roger's fame overnight, and it was also another beginning of his road to One Piece. One day after defeating Nyan, there was news. And the content of the news is the news that the rookie Roger of the pirates defeated the rookie General Nyan of the Navy. Similarly, Roger's and Rayleigh's bounties have both increased a lot. Roger's bounty has increased to 900 million, and Rayleigh's has increased to 710 million. Although Lan Yu and Seth also contributed a lot, but after all, they all paid for it behind their backs. Naturally, Akatsuki was not known to the world, and there was no bounty. After this incident, the Navy lost face and Nyan was demoted. In this way, more than 10 years, more than 20 years have passed, and after their continuous adventures, Roger's pirate group has grown larger and larger, and finally stood at the top of the pirate world and became the Pirate King. But after Roger became the Pirate King, he realized that the position he was looking forward to was so much that he wanted to leave. Since Roger became One Piece, his adventure can be said to have come to an end. No one bothered him at sea anymore, and he had a place to live forever. Although life has ushered in peace, it is not what he wants to continue to take risks. But neither the pirates nor the Navy dared to attack Roger. When he saw Roger turning around and running away, even if he wanted to take risks, it was impossible. After several years of this life, Roger began to cough every day and was very weak. Lan Yu and Seth helped Roger to take care of his body day and night, but no matter what, they couldn't cure Roger's illness. They also gradually began to understand that Roger's disease was incurable and could not be cured. Hearing this news, Roger didn't react, but just stared straight ahead in a daze. It was also that night that Roger decided to turn himself in. Instead of taking his own life hastily here, Roger has bigger plans. And this plan is undoubtedly the news of the key to open the door to the era of pirates. Lan Yu did not support Roger's decision and wanted to use his own abilities to save Roger. No matter how Roger discouraged him, even if he threatened to withdraw from the group, Lan Yu still had to use his abilities. When Lan Yu was about to use his abilities, Rayleigh knocked Lan Yu unconscious, which was ordered by Luo. When Lan Yu woke up again, the Roger pirates had been disbanded, and their captain was no longer alive. Lan Yu couldn't accept this fact, and his heart was hit very hard. The pirate group that was lively yesterday was disbanded now, and only Rayleigh and him were left. How could he accept Lan Yu's sadness for a few days? If it wasn't for Rayleigh's constant company, maybe Lan Yu what will happen. After Lan Yu was completely let go, the two came to the Chambord Islands to live alone. Because of Lan Yu's special status, Rayleigh didn't want to let him go out on his own, so he let her stay by his side. Until one day, when Hawk appeared, Lan Yu and Hawk got married. Lan Yu, who didn't want to stay in the Chambord Islands, also lived here in a down-to-earth way. He also saw everything Lan Yu had experienced, including Hawk's betrayal of him. Rayleigh, as the deputy captain of the Roger Pirates, can be said to be powerful, and his interpersonal relationships are also very broad. About Hawk's appearance is only known to him. It turned out that a crew member who once belonged to the Roger Pirates, after the dissolution of the Roger Pirates, betrayed the biggest secret of the Roger Pirates, that is, the secret of Lan Yu, in order to find the protection of a power. And the force he joined was the pirates. After Roger's death, the pirate group is also a very powerful rookie. After knowing Akatsuki's existence, they sent Hawk to lure Lan Yu, hoping to have the opportunity to bring her on board. But Hawk and Lan Yu got married within a few months and had a child. When preparing to let Hawk do it, Akatsuki knew about the child, so he asked Hawk not to do it for the time being. Because they don't know what the power of the ancients will become when they are pregnant with a child. The biggest possibility is that inherited on the child. If you do it at this time, this ability may be lost. One who desires power cannot allow such a thing to happen. Therefore, they continued to lurking patiently by Lan Yu's side for more than a year. Speaking of it now, Riley still feels guilty. That was obviously unfavorable too. Lan Yu was right beside them, and he lurked for more than a year, but he didn't find it. This also indirectly caused the tragedy of Lan Yu. So after the accident of Lan Yang's other child, Lan Yang, he has been silently guarding Lan Yu and Lan Ying, but he did not expect to be captured by the Tianlong people again. In order to find the whereabouts of Lan Yu and Lan Ying, Rayleigh also pretended to be caught by the Tianlong people many times, but in the end they returned to no avail. 907. Invite again, 4th update. Just when he was looking for Lan Ying to no avail, Gong Yi and Luffy happened to appear in front of him. Although he is also anxious about Lan Ying's affairs, it is more important for him to bring Gong Yi and Luffy to practice. Therefore, the matter of finding Lan Ying and Lan Yu can only be temporarily suppressed. Also this time, when Gong Yi brought Lan Ying back to dock number 49, Rayleigh admitted that he was surprised. He had been looking for Lan Ying for so long, but it was fruitless, but now it was found by Gong Yi. But although he was very surprised, he didn't show it too clearly, because he always protected Lan Ying from behind. But what he didn't expect was that Lan Yu lost his life during this time. Pervert from the Draco. Wait a minute, Lan Yu's mother has the power of the ancient weapon Michael. Lan Yu gave birth to 2 children, Lan Ying and Lan Yang. Now that Lan Yang is dead, then Michael's power, could it be? After Gong Yi listened to it, he suddenly realized something, and he spoke halfway without finishing it. He didn't want his conjecture to be correct. But to Gong Yi's disappointment, Rayleigh nodded, he understood what Gong Yi meant. So, now that she is out of the control of the Tianlong people, the pirate group will not let him go easily. Gong Yi looked at the moon in the sky and said. Rayleigh nodded, turned to look at Gong Yi, and said, so, take her away, although she will repeat the fate of Lan Yu, but I am a person who has half a foot in the coffin, it is impossible for me to stay forever. Protect her, so I hand her over to you, that's the only thing I ask of you. Rayleigh's expression has never been so serious, it seems that this matter of Lan Ying is not simple. Can I protect her? Gong Yi looked at Riley and for the first time in his life doubted himself. He has only been cultivating for 2 years since he first arrived in this world, and he is about to face one of the 4 emperors. The winning rate is probably very small. I believe you can. Lan Ying's power has not awakened yet. It can be said that she is completely unaware of the existence of her own power. As long as she is careful not to let her know that her power exists, she will not awaken. As long as she does not awaken, there will be no problem. Lan Ying inherits not only that her strength, and Lan Yu's talent in medicine, although he can't use that ability, her ability as a ship doctor is not low. Rayleigh explained the current situation of Lan Ying. Rayleigh was worried when Lan Ying was captured as a slave by the Tianlong people. Of Lan Ying and Lan Yu, the other is that Lan Ying's power will awaken. Fortunately, when I saw Lan Ying this time, I felt that she was not awakened. That's enough. As for these things, Lan Ying doesn't need to know. With Lan Ying's character, 99% will go there to find that. The so-called father. By that time, Lan Ying was really in danger, so Rayleigh didn't plan to tell Lan Ying. As for what happened in the future, Rayleigh didn't know Akatsuki. Maybe one day, Lan Ying's existence will be discovered, but at least not now. So before that, there is still a chance for Gong Yi to grow up. Okay, I will definitely take Lan Ying. Gong Yi's expression gradually became serious, and finally agreed to Rayleigh's request. Gong Yi understood that if he took Lan Ying away, it would be unimaginable to hunt him down in the future, but Gong Yi was not afraid. He is the man who wants to become the Pirate King, surpassing Luffy, surpassing the 4 emperors, surpassing everyone, and since this is the case, he will not be afraid of trouble. Gong Yi's determined look, Rayleigh nodded and smiled, he didn't see the wrong person. However, where Rayleigh and Gong Yi didn't know, there was a pair of eyes looking at them secretly, and after they finished talking, the corners of his mouth twitched, he left here, and went back to the house. The next morning, Gong Yi got up early because he had to continue to persuade Lan Ying. But what he didn't expect was that Lan Ying got up earlier than him. Lan Ying, let's talk, okay. Gong Yi looked at Lan Ying who was cleaning, walked to Lan Ying's side, and said. Being stopped by Gong Yi, Lan Ying was undoubtedly stunned, then turned around without looking at Gong Yi, and said, if it's about letting me join your pirate group, then forget it, sorry, I'm not interested. Lan Ying clenched her fists and tried to calm herself down as much as possible, otherwise she would really be unable to control her desire to go on an adventure with Gong Yi. I've heard everything about you, including your dislike. The reason for the pirates. Seeing that Lan Ying didn't want to talk to him, Gong Yi had to say it here. When Gong Yi finished speaking, Lan Ying's body trembled. She didn't expect Gong Yi to know about her. She couldn't help feeling a little uncontrollable and said, so, what if you know? Come with us and join our pirate group. Gong Yi once again invited Lan Ying to join his pirate group, and didn't mind the issue of face at all. 908. Agree to join. After Gong Yi's words, Lan Ying was shocked again, but still shook her head, she didn't want to join the pirates, not at all. I know that the pirate group has caused you a lot of damage, but after all, people are different. We just met, and I don't dare to overestimate myself, so how am I? Such a person, why do you think I said we would like to go with you to take revenge, do you believe it? Seeing that Lan Ying still refused, Gong Yi continued to speak sincerely. What is Gong Yi's character? In the past few days, Lan Ying has basically seen it clearly. In her opinion, Gong Yi is a very good person. But when Lan Yu knew Hawk, Hawk also pretended very well and deceived her mother for a whole year. Now that Gong Yi is good to her, how can she believe it 100%? When he continued to refuse, Gong Yi knelt on one knee directly on the ground, looked at Lan Ying, and said, "I, Gong Yi, are willing to guarantee you everything, we will never betray you." Gong Yi's actions and words undoubtedly moved Lan Ying. Lan Ying couldn't hold back her tears any longer and started to sob quietly. Since she and her mother were caught by the Tianlong people, has anyone ever been so kind to her? Sakura, this person is worth your trust. If it's just to deceive you, there's no need to protect you desperately under the hands of the Tianlong people. Just when Gong Yi was trying to persuade Lan Ying in various ways, a male voice suddenly said beside them. "That's right, it's Rocky, the one who told Gong Yi about Lan Ying. Really, won't you be betrayed?" Lan Ying saw that Rocky also said the same. She admitted that her insistence on the mentality began to waver, but she was still cautious. Regarding Lan Ying and Rocky's words, Lan Ying admitted that she was shaken, and immediately, the two nodded, and Rocky hoped that he would believe it. And Gong Yi hoped Lan Ying can give him a chance. At this moment, Lan Ying's heart that had been holding on for a long time finally fell apart. She believed in Gong Yi once, that's okay. Then, Lan Ying nodded half hesitantly and half willingly, and said, "Okay, I will join you as a ship doctor." Lan Ying wiped her tears and dragged Gong Yi up from the ground with a smile. She was very happy, she also had a partner. "We will never betray you." Gong Yi looked at Lan Ying's cautious look and said with determination. But for Lan Ying, Gong Yi has not yet turned 20, but because of his betrayal, his heart was devastated and shattered. And Rayleigh, who had been watching on the side, looked at, and smiled with satisfaction. Now, he is not afraid of when he will die, and he can rest in peace. "We have made so much trouble in the Chambord Islands that we can't stay for long. Hurry up and get out of here." After Lan Ying joined, she said to Gong Yi. Now she is also a member of the Fire Pirates and should be considered for her own pirates. Gong Yi agreed with Lan Ying's words, but now, they can't leave. "Teacher, when will the auction in dock number 1 start?" Gong Yi looked at Rayleigh who was on the side and asked. Rayleigh, who was sitting behind the door, chuckled. It seemed that Gong Yi had already discovered his existence. "That's it. Today, I have inquired about it. Among the auction items today, there is the trunk of the Adam tree, the thing you want the most." Rayleigh came out from behind the door and answered Gong Yi's question. Originally, Rayleigh was going to wait for Gong Yi and Lan Ying to finish talking and tell Gong Yi directly, but Gong Yi came over to ask first, and he also answered Gong Yi's question. Is the trunk of the Adam tree the hardest wood in the legend? Speaking of the trunk of the Adam tree, Lan Ying also knew something, and then asked. Gong Yi nodded and explained to Lan Ying. They don't have a pirate ship yet, they only have a pirate flag, so Gong Yi wants to choose Adam's trunk for the structure of the ship. As for the drawings, he was able to draw them, he already had ideas, and with Meyer's ability, creating a pirate ship was a very simple matter. It's almost about to start, let's go, I'll take you to the auction house. Just after Gong Yi finished explaining to Lan Ying, Rayleigh said. Gong Yi nodded, and they were ready to go to dock number 1. Not only Rayleigh and Gong Yi, but also Meyer and Lan Ying went to the auction house. There is money left after photographing the trunk of the Adam tree, it can just be used to buy food or something. Although they say they don't have serious chefs yet, Lan Ying said that she can cook a little bit, and they can guarantee that they don't only need to eat dry food for the time being. But Lan Ying can only make 1 soup and 2 dishes, they can't eat only 2 dishes all the time. At this moment, Gong Yi said how much he wished he could have a chef, but it was impossible. Gong Yi sighed, and after finishing the boat, he had to hurry to find the cook. But the chefs are not so easy to find. It seems that they still have to eat dry food for a while in the 2 dishes made by Lan Ying. 909. Number 1 Dock Auction. Just when Gong Yi sighed, they had also arrived at the auction house of number 1 dock. The 500 million Bailey was held in Rayleigh's hands, and it was also safe. If you wanted to grab something from Rayleigh's hands, 3 words, it was impossible. Because when they bought furniture, half of them were interrupted because of Gong Yi's affairs, so they didn't spend the 500 million Bailey at all. So, there is still plenty of money. According to Rayleigh's information, Adam's price will only cost 200 million at most, and the remaining 300 million will be at least 200 million after buying ingredients and furniture, medicinal materials and books, and clothes. Go up, the rest of the money, just keep it, don't spend it indiscriminately. After all, it was Meyer's hard work during those 2 years. After arriving at dock number 1, it can be clearly seen that in front of the door of dock number 1, there are several guards guarding the door. Obviously to prevent someone from robbing or making trouble. Let's go, the auction will start soon. Just as Gong Yi was looking around the auction house, Rayleigh said. Gong Yi was dragged back by Rayleigh's voice, nodded, followed behind Rayleigh, and entered the auction house slowly. Anyway, the auction hasn't started yet, so there's nothing to worry about. When Rayleigh, Gong Yi and others entered the auction house, there were 2 women wearing masks in front of the door. Everyone who came in needed to wear a mask, which was very important for protecting personal safety. This auction, I heard that the finale auction item is a rare existence in 100 years. If the person who wants it does not get it, it may secretly launch an attack on the person who grabbed it to snatch the auction product. So put on a mask, and the light is relatively dim. After leaving here, no one will recognize who. It is of great help to the personal safety of the holder. A few here, please. After Gong Yi and the others were all wearing masks, a woman pointed them to a slightly lower position in the auction house and said. Gong Yi nodded, and a few people walked over there. This position is neither good nor bad. The entire auction house is arranged according to the amount of money brought. Gong Yi and the others brought 500 million Baileys, which can be regarded as half a small one, so naturally they were placed in a low position, so they could observe the goods at close range. But above this low position, all are some arrogant nobles, and some people are sitting beside them. Naturally they are very disdainful. For this kind of environment, although there was a lot of noise in the seats around Gong Yi frowned slightly, but felt it was very noisy. Few minutes later, the auction venue, which was originally dimly lit, completely darkened in an instant, and then, several spotlights were reflected on the platform directly in front of the auction house. Standing on the platform is the host of this auction. Dear ladies and gentlemen, our auction is about to start after a long absence. Are you ready? The host's words fell behind, and there were various shouts from the audience. This auction is undoubtedly expected by many people. After all, since Luffy came out, their auctions have rarely been held well. The auction that was going to be held was postponed for another half a month. During this half month, everyone was looking forward to the start of the auction. This auction is sure to be fierce. Then let's take a look at our first product. It's a girl from. She can sing and dance well. She is a rare doll to pass the time when you are bored. As the host's words fell, a girl was pushed up by soldiers from below. Along with the sighs of many people, the girl's eyes gradually filled with fear. The Chambord archipelago is an illegal and unstoppable slave trade. She has never heard of it being sold, and it is impossible for her to escape alive in her life. So when she really stood on this stage, the girl knew that her life was really coming to an end. Don't, let me go, don't. Girl's face was full of tears. Looking in horror at the wretched expression of the person on the stage, she fell into extreme panic, and even began to struggle. She doesn't want to die yet. She doesn't want to. The new slaves are not very obedient. After buying them, they can be trained slowly. Training slaves is also a kind of fun. Then the auction will begin, starting at 100,000 Baileys, and increasing the price each time. At least 50,000 Baileys. The host looked at the struggling girl, gestured to the soldiers, signaled them to control the girl, and then looked at the stage, regaining her usual composure, and said, "This kind of situation is not surprising. When a slave first came, he didn't look like he refused and was afraid, but everyone chose to accept his fate in the end, obediently surrendered to the Tianlong people, and became a humble slave. So for this situation, the people below have no reaction, and they are all the last struggles of the prey." Please download Filu's novel. Read the latest chapter. Baidu search 99 Playmate find 99 Novel Network. 910. Adam Tree Third More. Next, amid the girls' panic, the auction started. "I'll pay 150,000 Baileys." A man stood up first, held up a sign, and added the price. From the voice of the girl crying just now, you can feel that the girl's voice is very good, and the singing is good, and it must be true. Therefore, those nobles who like singing and dancing immediately started a fierce auction. "I'll give 200,000 Baileys." "I'm 300,000. 350,000. 500,000. After a fierce competition, a man stood up and said. His tone was full of indifference, and there was no sense of color. 500,000. Does anyone continue to add up? The host asked in traditional words. 5 million once. 5,000 two times. 5,000 three times. Deal. And, the girl was bought for 500,000. Lan Ying looked at this auction and tugged at Gong Yi's sleeve, but Gong Yi shook her head, and Lan Ying had to bow her head in disappointment, not wanting to continue watching this cruel auction. Gong Yi knows what Lan Ying wants to do. He wants to save these. The girl and boy who were bought and sold by the nobles. But Gong Yi can't do it. He's not an immortal, and his money is limited. He can't save everyone, and he can't openly rob people at this auction. So all they can do is watch this illegal auction. Because this auction was so cruel, it reminded Lan Ying of her past, so she simply covered her ears and wanted to isolate herself from this world. Looking at Lan Ying's reaction, Gong Yi sighed. If he has the ability later, he will definitely overturn the so-called largest of the Tianlong people and the illegal auction of the Chambord archipelago. Only by doing so can we be redeemed. However, Gong Yi doesn't. No, this idea he is in will make him the biggest thorn in the eyes of the Navy and the world government. Of course, this is something else. Time passed by, and in the blink of an eye, the auction in the first half had ended, but Adam Tree did not appear. Teacher, the first half is over, why is there no Adam Tree yet? Gong Yi frowned slightly, looking at the auction during the intermission, and asked. The auction will be divided into 2 sessions, the first half and the second half, with an intermission in between. The first half and the second half is that the things in the second half and the things in the first half are not of the same grade. In the second half, the last thing to exist, also need 200 million Bailey to make a bottom. This is more than the value of the Adam Tree. If the auctioneer foolishly puts the Adam Tree in the second half, 80% of it will not be sold. Therefore, what Gong Yi is more suspicious of now is whether this auction has the existence of Adam Tree. Today's auction, there is indeed Adam, but it's so strange. Riley was also puzzled by this situation. The news he got couldn't possibly be wrong. Adam would definitely appear, but why hasn't it appeared yet? Could it be true that it was divided into the second half, but it should be impossible. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, our exciting second half auction is about to begin, please take your seats. Just when Riley and Gong Yi thought it was unbelievable, the host on stage had announced the opening of the second half. After hearing the host's words, everyone sat down for the first time, resumed quiet, and waited for the start of the second half. Now, 2/3 of the people present are coming for the second half of the auction. In anticipation of the crowd, the first item in the second half, covered with a yuhi-colored cloth, was lifted up. What is this? They can't see it, they only know that it's so huge that it almost fills the entire stage. This is our first merchandise of the second half. What will it be? We'll see now. After the host was carrying the goods up, they sold a little bit, and then, in the expectation of everyone, the yuhi cloth was slowly pulled down. When Yuhi clothed the ground, most of the people present were shocked, including Gong Yi of course. That fell on this stage the Adam tree. But why are there leaves and fruits on the Adam tree? Everyone must know what this is. Yes, it is the most sturdy tree in the world, Adam, but this Adam tree has leaves, and in the entire great root, even among the 4 seas, there is only this last Adam tree with fruit and leaves. The host saw the surprised look of everyone, nodded with satisfaction, and then explained. Gong Yi can also guess, presumably this Adam tree will be thrown into the second half, that is, because of the 3 or 2 fruits and the leaves of the tree. What is the use of this fruit and leaf, Gong Yi is? I don't know. The fruits and leaves of the Adam tree are all high-quality medicinal materials and are the nemesis of many diseases in the world, so this Adam tree can be said to have a great effect on doctors. Just when Gong Yi was puzzled, the host explained Adam's fruit and leaves. 911. Take Adam. After the host's words fell, there was an uproar in the audience, including Lan Ying. Lan Ying has been gifted in medicine since she was a child, even though no one taught her. Her medical skills are also very remarkable. What use are the leaves and fruits of the Adam tree? She knows all too well. The effect of the leaves of the Adam tree is not particularly large, and it can only be used to treat some common diseases, and the effect is relatively significant. What really matters are the few fruits. On the tree of Adam tree, an extra large bag was put on it, probably to prevent someone from grabbing the leaves or fruits on the tree. Let's not talk much, we will start the auction now. The starting price is 200 million Bailey, and each increase is not less than 100,000. When the host was excited, he said. After the host's words fell, the audience instantly became excited. I'll give 200 million Baileys. I'll pay 220,000 Baileys. 23 million. ... Auction intensified, making Gong Yi a little relieved for a while. When will this be? 260 million 2 Baileys. Just when Gong Yi hesitated whether to raise the price of Adam tree had reached 260 million 2. Everyone in the field closed their mouths and stopped raising prices. Most people are for the finale baby, who would put so much effort on this tree, 262 million. Just when Gong Yi was about to raise the price, Lan Ying, who was beside him, spoke first. Because Lan Ying didn't ask Gong Yi's opinion, she just opened her mouth, so that she felt a little embarrassed, which made her speak less and less. After finishing speaking, Lan Ying's eyes turned to Gong Yi again, with a hint of questioning. 263 million. Just when Gong Yi was about to say something to Lan Ying, the people over there raised the price again. The people over there frowned when they saw that someone was robbing them. They didn't want to let the tree go, and continued to snatch it. Don't stop, keep going, grab him. He waved his hand and motioned for Lan Ying to continue. In any case, even if it were to lift up to 500 million, he would still be able to carry this tree. 264 million. Lan Ying Gong Yi's permission, Lan Ying gained a little more momentum and continued to snatch Adam with that person. It's true that the two of them are competing, 164 million. Does anyone continue to increase the price? Just as the man was thinking, the host spoke again. 267 million Baileys. The man was dragged back to his mind by the host's words and continued to increase the price. Seeing that person lifted 300,000 yuan in one breath, Lan Ying was a little panicked for a moment, and it seemed that there was an inevitable attitude towards Adam tree. Lan Ying and Gong Yi fell into silence, and neither of them spoke. 267 million Bailey. Does anyone continue to increase the price? There was something wrong with the host's expression for a while. Gong Yi could see it subtly. 267 million once. The host's words were a little slow, looking forward to someone continuing to increase the price. And at this moment in this scene, the person who has been robbing Adam with Gong Yi is also a little bit overwhelmed in face, and he doesn't know what to do for a while. 267 million times. The host's words continued, but still very slowly. 267 million, it's. In the end, the host can't hold on to the face, and can only prepare for the deal. But before the host's words were finished, Gong Yi's words came out. 280 million too. Lan Ying was going to ask whether to continue raising the price, but Gong Yi said directly. A thick and slightly magnetic voice echoed throughout the venue of the auction house. The host and the people over there breathed a sigh of relief. The people over there did not continue to speak, and it seemed that they had given up Adam's competition. 280 million too. Does anyone still increase the price? The host saw that the man over there was no longer speaking, and Lan Ying was no longer speaking, and spoke. In response to him, there was still silence. 280 million too once. Words fell, and there was silence again. 28 million two times. This time, the host waited a little longer, but the audience was still silent. 280 million two times, a deal. Host saw that no one raised the price, it was settled in one go, and the tree belonged to Gong Yi. Gong Yi looked at the person over there and chuckled, but it wasn't that he couldn't see it, that the bully who kept raising the price with him was nothing more than a trust from the auction house. And Adam has carried nearly 50 million. It seems that the last treasure of the auction house today is also going to be carried to the sky. Gong Yi did not choose to leave directly, but continued to participate in the auction and visit here. Just as he thought, there are two people who are desperately raising the price no matter what kind of treasure, the two auction houses. Time flies, 40 minutes have passed, and finally the auction house's finale, the baby, will be on the stage. Like when Adam came up the tree, the baby was also covered with yuhi cloth. But the difference is that this baby is covered with 4 layers of yuhi cloth. But even so, it still can't hide the light that this baby radiates. 912. Shadow. Looking at the baby on the stage, Meyer's expression fell into a tangled state. This baby, why does he feel déjà vu? This feeling, this light, this breath, all make him feel familiar, but he can't remember what it feels like. Then next, is our exciting finale baby debut. Then, amid the expectations of everyone and Meyer's inconvenience, the yuhi cloth covering the goods on the stage fell to the ground, and the light became more and more dazzling. When the last layer of yuhi cloth fell to the ground, the entire dark lobby was illuminated by the dazzling light of this commodity, but only for a moment. The baby returned to calm, and there was no more light. And at this time, everyone can almost see clearly what is on the stage. It was a sword, completely black, with a dark blue gem engraved in the center of the hilt, and a blue gem in the center of the blade. This is on the stage clearly. Some people on the stage couldn't sit still, looking at the sword on the stage. Their mouths were so frightened that they couldn't close their mouths. It seems that this gentleman knows this sword. The person's reaction was also seen by the host, and said with a chuckle. The host's words fell. Everyone's eyes were focused on the gentleman, full of curiosity. Everyone's expectations. That man nodded his head woodenly. He did know this sword. But this person's reaction can be described as making the question mark in everyone's heart stronger and stronger. What kind of sword is this? Why is that person so surprised? Gong Yi was no exception and was very curious. This sword is called the Shadow, and it is genuine. We have verified that this is the only shadow sword in the world. When everyone was curious, the host said the name of the sword. But the host's words fell behind, and everyone in the audience was stunned, and no one could speak. They heard what the real ghost image is in everyone's memory. The ghost image is just a sword that exists in the legend. Who would have thought that this sword actually existed? What is the ghost image and what is the difference between this sword? There are also many people on the stage who don't know the ghost, and one person can't help but ask. He doesn't know what a ghost is. In his opinion, the ghost is just a sword that looks more high-end. Why is it the finale treasure of this auction? The ghost in the ghost sword, this. There are demons. Just after that person asked the question, a person beside him raised his voice and said. But his words made the man a little confused, and he didn't understand what he was talking about. "I won't sell it, then, let me tell you about the origin of the shadow sword." Host saw that everyone was in deep doubt, and was full of curiosity about the ghost. He laughed a few times, and then began to tell the story of the ghost. Speaking of ghosts, this sword is an existence that is inseparable from the devil fruit. To legend, the shadow sword was just a very ordinary broken sword at the beginning. A sword that exists beside the devil fruit. That this sword will appear whenever a new devil fruit appears. He appeared near the devil fruit. Obviously no one was going to get the sword, but the sword would move by itself. Every time the devil fruit appears, the ghost will suddenly appear. No one knows how he appeared here. The phantom will automatically cut off the devil fruit and let it fall into the sea or somewhere else. According to legend, the devil fruit grows on a tree. Because of the existence of the shadow sword, the devil fruit will appear in front of the world. Some people also said that the shadow sword swallowed part of the devil's power in the devil fruit, and the entire sword gradually changed. Thousands of years later, the shadow sword has also cut down countless devil fruits. It is said that every time the devil fruit dies, it will be reborn in a certain place. That is to say, the number of times the shadow sword is cut for each fruit is more than one time. Over time, bit by bit of power was stored in the ghost sword body, and the sword body slowly turned black. The pure black seemed to be a sword possessed by a demon. After a long time, a person got the magic shadow sword. That is, the first owner of the magic shadow sword. However, within 3 days of the man getting the shadow sword, the man died violently at home. When the body was discovered, all the corpses were covered with knife marks. No matter how many people get the shadow sword, this is the end. Devoured the demon that resided in the devil fruit, the shadow sword is already very impressive. But adding these, the innocent resentful spirits who were killed were lodged. This sword became a cursed sword, and everyone who saw it tried their best to avoid it, for fear that they would suffer misfortune. In this way, hundreds of years have passed, and the shadow sword is no longer the lifeless black it used to be, but black and translucent, which is even more frightening, as if this sword has life. 913. Sword auctioned by special method. After a long time, a devil fruit power user got this sword. The capable person could also see the difference in this sword and accepted it. But 3 days later, the capable person did not die, but every day there were large and small stab wounds on his body. Although he was injured, everyone felt it was incredible. He was probably the only person in the world who had lived under the shadow of magic for 3 days. And true master of the shadow sword. The ghost sword is very hostile. In order to suppress it, the owner has been floating on the sea for many years, looking for the aquamarine, and finally set it on the ghost sword one by one. In this way, the able man took this sword and started an adventure at sea, and no one could beat him. After the death of the capable one, the sword also disappeared, and until now, it has appeared in front of everyone again. Because of the suppression of the aura in the aquamarine, the shadow sword is not as violent as before. As long as you can get the shadow sword, it can be said to add a great strength to yourself. Therefore, many people in the world want to find the shadow sword, but no one can find the shadow sword. Now that the ghost was discovered, he didn't keep it, but put it up for auction. The host slowly explained that this is the origin of the shadow sword. Since that person can get the magic shadow sword, why not keep such a precious thing by himself? And some people will be willing to take it out for auction. Just when the host had just finished explaining, a person in the back stood up and asked the host. This sword is not an ordinary sword, and no one can use it. You need it to recognize you. Naturally, the master failed to obtain the recognition of this sword. The host was speechless about the man's question, but still answered it. Hearing this, there was an uproar in the audience. It seems that this sword is not something that can be obtained with money. Then don't talk too much, let's get started. Some people waited impatiently and didn't want to continue listening to some useless things, so they coaxed the host and said. After that person finished speaking, the rest of the people also began to boo, demanding to start the auction quickly. So, this sword is not a common sword, and the auction process we go through is also different. Seeing that the people in the audience could not wait to start, the host made another move. If possible, the host. I hope this sword can be auctioned in the same way as other merchants. It's a pity that the owner of this sword made a request, and he has a solution. What process is going to kill someone? After the host finished speaking, another woman spoke up. The people in the audience couldn't wait to get this sword, and they were naturally very bored in the face of the host who kept trying to sell things. The other people listened to the woman's words and also agreed. This sword can be taken away with only 100 million Baileys, provided that the sword can recognize you, that is to say, people come up, give 100 million Baileys to me, and then drip their own blood on the sword, as long as the sword luminous recognition, this sword is yours, of course, without recognition of you, this billion Bailey cannot be taken away. When the host saw the people in the audience, they all became anxious and stopped giving up. Although he is the host here, he still has no good fruit to anger the nobles. After the host's words fell, everyone couldn't wait to come up and try it. Anyway, it's only 100 million Bailey, they won't lose if they can get the sword, so naturally they want to give it a try. But that's not the case for the host. At least a few hundred people present here, maybe he can get billions of Baileys. He heard that it is not easy to get this sword recognized, maybe he can earn tens of billions. Instant, the small abacus in the host's head began to snap. It started, and this was also a huge profit. Then, according to the order of seat numbers, come forward and try, of course, if you are not interested, you may not come up. Host didn't talk nonsense, clapped his hands, and made a please gesture to the first person in the first row. Then, the man slowly walked up to the stage. This kind of sword, who wouldn't want to be in the tense atmosphere of the crowd? That person put 100 million Bailey on the ground, then took the knife on the host's table, cut a small incision on his finger, and then dropped a drop of blood dripped onto the sword. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds 3. A full minute passed, and the sword still didn't respond at all. Ah, it seems, this sword is no longer with you. Looking at the motionless sword, the host said embarrassedly. Because now, he can clearly feel the anger of this gentleman. He is the person who brings the most money in this auction. Naturally, it is not simple. If such a big man is angry, how can he not be afraid? Damn, what a broken thing. That didn't react at all, and he was so angry that he was about to grab the sword. However, just as he touched the body of the sword, he was knocked to the ground by the force of the sword. 914. The man who refused the ghost third more. The man didn't expect the sword to be able to unleash its own power at all. He was knocked to the ground by the sword, and the corners of his mouth began to bleed, obviously being injured. Are you all right? Come and take this gentleman down to check. When the host saw this scene, he was so frightened that he stepped forward and looked at the man, and said to the woman next to him. Seeing this, the woman nodded sensibly, and then supported the man and started to walk downstairs. When the man left, he gave the sword a vicious look. Nothing more than refusing yourself, and hurting yourself, it's really a wicked sword. Everyone has also seen that this sword cannot be taken away by force. Then, let's continue. No, please. After the person was taken off the stage, the host wiped the sweat from his forehead and said to the people on the field. For a moment, the audience fell into silence. A few wicked people saw this situation and silently dismissed the thought in their hearts and stopped talking. The second person is the wife of the first person, looking at the sword, swallowed silently. Just before the man went up, he told his wife that if he couldn't do it, his wife would go up and try, so she came up. In fact, about this sword, the woman said that she had no idea at all. Except, beautiful, there is nothing that can make her heart give. The woman also took out 100 million from her arms and threw it on the ground, and then dripped blood on the sword. With this sword, there is no doubt that there is no reaction at all. The wife sighed and had to step off the stage. She wasn't as excited as her husband was, and she might have lost half of her life in a shock. Fortunately, she didn't do anything out of the ordinary, and the sword didn't react, so the woman felt at ease. Gong Yi, I want this sword, okay. Mayer looked at the two people who were rejected by the sword after taking the stage, then turned his head, looked at Gong Yi, and said with a serious face. After they bought Adam, the remaining money was only more than 200 million, and now they have to waste another 100 million on this sword. Mayer is still afraid that Gong Yi will agree. But no matter what, he wanted to try it, or it was his illusion. He always felt, that sword. Let him hurry up and take him away. Yes, but we only have a little left, less than 300 million. You can only go up and try it yourself. If you see and get it, there is nothing you can do. Gong Yi nodded, agreed to May's request, and said, if you want to go up and try it. But you can get this sword. But, Gong Yi, you're not afraid. Gong Yi had no intention of rejecting at all. Mayer agreed very readily. Some did not respond, and said. Before he could finish his words, he was interrupted by Gong Yi. I know what you're going to say. Originally the 500 million was what you contributed. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't even have a boat. Now if you have money left over, use it to buy what you want. What's wrong with it? Gong Yi had already guessed what Mayer was going to say. Mayer was afraid that he would not be recognized by that sword, and then wasted 100 million Bailey, so he had a slight hope that Gong Yi would reject him. But Gong Yi was more generous than he thought and gave him this chance. Gong Yi had no intention of stopping him. Mayer swallowed and nodded. Anyway, he's going to try. Next, they didn't say anything, quietly watching the triers on the stage. Before he got to him, Gong Yi was still very uneasy, for fear that the sword would be taken away by others. This may be the first time since Gong Yi was born that he desperately wanted something. Gradually, the people in the first 3 rows had already finished their trials, and in total, a total of 2,732 people were rejected by this sword. Seeing the mountains of money piled up on the stage, the host's eyes almost fell. 27,300,200,002 Bailey, this is to make a fortune. Then, next, the gentleman in the 4th row asks you to come down and try. The host pointed to the gentleman in the 4th row and said. Because he has made a lot of money, he is in a good mood now, so his tone of speech is a little more respectful. My family is poor and I don't have the money to try. Please change someone else. After receiving the invitation, the man just smiled and waved his hand to indicate that he would not go up. This is the first person who refuses to try it after so long. Only one reason for rejecting such an attractive commodity, and that is that he is really poor. Host didn't talk too much nonsense, and immediately pointed to the next person. Seeing this scene, Gong Yi smiled and said nothing. This is obviously because the person does not want to go, and it has nothing to do with money. To ask why, because this person is in the row in front of Gong Yi and them, he must have a lot more money than them. Some people may also say that he shot something else before. However, in the impression of self-love Gong Yi, this person does not seem to raise the price very much. Only when he was Adam, he called once, and there is no second time. It can be seen that he is definitely, I don't want to try. 915. It's time for you. The people over there also felt the observation from Gong Yi, turned their heads to look at Gong Yi, and smiled lightly. Seeing that he was peeking at other people's exposure, Gong Yi nodded embarrassedly, and then turned his head. He didn't know how long he had looked at that person, so he had to cough twice to ease the embarrassment. Next gentleman, would you like to try? After the person refused, the host continued to call down. That's right, the person called this time is Mayer. Try. Mayer nodded, indicating that he was going to try it, and then stood up. Gong Yi took out 100 million from the box and gave it to Mayer, smiled at Meyer, and made a cheer gesture. Meyer smiled, nodded, and then nervously walked up to the stage. He longed for this sword. Why, I don't know. Gong Yi, are you going to try it too? After seeing Meyer go up, Lan Ying asked in Gong Yi's ear. Meyer was going up to try it. Meyer and Lan Ying didn't know, because they didn't hear the conversation between Gong Yi and Meyer, so naturally they didn't know that Meyer was going up to try. For a while they thought Gong Yi and Meyer are going to try it out. I'm not interested, but that. He seems to be very excited about the sword, hoping to get it. Gong Yi shook his head, expressing that he didn't have much interest in that sword. It was just Meyer wanted it, he agreed. At this moment, the faces of Gong Yi and others were also a little solemn. They didn't know if Meyer could get this sword, but they all hoped that Meyer could get it. Gong Yi and Lan Ying's idea is to hope that Meyer can get his wish, but unfortunately, the only idea in Rayleigh's heart is that the 100 million Baileys should not be wasted. What is this sword? Rayleigh and Roger have been rampant at sea for so many years. Naturally they can't reach the level of ignorance, so he also knows what this sword represents. This shadow sword, as Rayleigh knew, resisted being touched by others, unless it was its own master. But this shadow sword has only one owner, and that is the one who suppressed the power in the shadow. Was also encountered when they were sailing. After knowing his legend, the people on the ship tried one by one to make the sword recognize the master. Because Roger and Rayleigh have nothing against swords. But in the whole ship, no one accepted this sword, and they were even injured by the sword. In the end, when Rayleigh and Roger tried, Rayleigh was also rejected by the sword, but fortunately he was good at it and was not injured by the sword. And Roger reached the vicinity of the sword, did not try to bleed, but reached out his hand to pick up the sword. Just above everyone's worried eyes, Roger encountered the sword. But unlike the others, Roger touched the sword, and the sword did not respond, and did not seem to reject him. Just when everyone thought that this sword was to recognize Roger as the master, something incredible happened. When Roger's blood just dripped onto the sword body emitted a huge light. When everyone was about to celebrate for Roger, Roger reached out and touched the sword, but he was also rejected. After a while, the sword stabilized, and Roger tried to touch the sword again, but unfortunately nothing happened, and he couldn't pick it up. Seemed that the shadow sword just did not resist Roger touching it, and had no intention of recognizing its master. After everyone failed, someone proposed to take the ghost away for auction. This will not only help it find an owner, but also make a lot of money. But Roger refused, saying that this sword also has its own destiny, and we cannot take it away without authorization. Afterwards, Roger threw the sword back into the sea where he found it, letting the sword float away little by little. Seeing the sword gradually drifting away, everyone's heart was full of mixed feelings. It was not a small sum of money. This is the legendary ghost sword, maybe it can be sold for billions. That Roger doesn't have much interest in things like money. All he wants is non-stop adventure. Thinking of this, Rayleigh sighed and chuckled. He didn't expect to see this sword again now. After so long, it is still a good sword without a master. In the midst of everyone's anxiety and panic, Meyer placed 100 million Baileys on the pile of hills. After that, instead of picking up the knife, he bit his finger and dripped it on the sword. The knife prepared by the host, at this moment, already has the blood of many people on it. If he also used this sword, his own blood would definitely be mixed with other people's blood, so even if he really had a relationship with this sword, he would probably be rejected in confusion. After that, Meyer's blood gradually dripped onto the sword in front of everyone's eyes. Unlike the previous ones, after Meyer's blood dripped down, the sword body began to emit light in an instant, extremely dazzling. Even when this sword was first brought up, it was not so dazzling. Afterwards, with a look of anticipation, Meyer gradually stretched out his hand to the sword, looking forward to the arrival of a miracle. 916. Recognize the Lord and make a fuss. When Meyer touched the sword, the sword did not mean to resist. Unlike when other people touched the sword was easily picked up by Mayer, and after waving it a few times, he was happy. Smiled. This sword is his. Host, can I take this sword with me? Mayer looked at the host and said with a shadow sword in his hand. The host looked at the shadow sword, which did not resist at all, and couldn't believe it for a while. Was not rejected by the shadow sword after the death of the first owner of the shadow sword. Okay, this sword is now yours. Although the host was a little stunned, he didn't stay in a daze for too long, and then nodded, indicating that this sword was Mayer's. Mayer nodded, then fiddled with the phantom a few more times, put it back in the scabbard, hung it around his waist, and prepared to return to Gong Yi's side. Wait a minute, I don't accept it. The people behind us haven't tried it yet, why can he just take it away? Just when Mayer was about to step down, a man in the last row was dissatisfied, looked at the shadow sword that was taken away, bit Kiba angrily, and made a crunching sound of disapproval. 4. The kind of person who says that the grapes are sour when they can't eat them, Mayer naturally doesn't intend to take care of them. First, since you're behind and you won't have the chance, that's why you don't have a chance with this sword. Second, the shadow sword has taken a fancy to this gentleman. Even if you are the first, you will be with this sword. Missing. Besides, you who are sitting in the last row, do you have 100 million Baileys to try? The host looked at the slightly fat man, his face was not very good. He dislikes the kind of person who has no money but loves to pick things up. If there is a lot of money, why sit in the last row so that there is no way to reach the sword? Their auction house is not a coward, there are people behind them, except Tianlong people can be said to be fearless. 4. This person's provocation, naturally, there is no point of view. Wait a minute, that sword, I want it. Just as the host choked on the man under the stage and Mayer was about to go down, the door of the auction venue was suddenly kicked open, and the voice filled the audience. Looking at the sound, one could see a strong man holding a gun in his hand and the guard outside the door in the other hand, as if he was demonstrating. Standing on the stage, he could see behind him, and it seemed that he was still with people. After the strong man came in, the rest of the people followed the strong man and walked in one after another. Almost everyone had a gun in their hands, and the entrance to the big auction hall was already surrounded by water. Little boy, listen to Brother Yiya, he said provocatively, and then returned the gun to court. Looking at the brawny man under the stage, Gong Yi continued to sit in his original position. 4. This so-called robbery. There is no opinion. Hey, there's a good show to watch, right? The man sitting next to Gong Yi said, then looked at Gong Yi and smiled and said. The person who spoke was the man who had just been stared at by Gong Yi for a while. Are you watching a play? Gong Yi heard the words, the corners of his mouth raised slightly. He could hear the man's words. Man knew that Mayer was his person, and now that these people came to snatch things from Mayer, Gong Yi naturally wanted to take action. That the man was watching was exactly Gong Yi's play. But Gong Yi couldn't feel anything wrong with that person, and it seemed that he was sitting here with the mentality of watching the fun. Instead of mantises catching cicadas, the oriole is behind. Little brat, your standards for measuring people really make people sigh. When Mayer heard the strong man's words, he almost didn't laugh out loud. Since Mayer has been in the city, he was malnourished, and his current size can be said to be very petite, probably being treated as a child. But just by looking at the appearance, it seems that these people are not very powerful characters. What's wrong with calling you a brat? I've eaten more salt than you have ever eaten. Why, provoke me? The strong man said. Originally, the strong man wanted to say that Lao Su has eaten more salt than you have eaten rice, but he couldn't remember this sentence, so he had to skip it vaguely, and then said that Mayer was going to be provocative. Seeing the brawny man making trouble unreasonably and acting like a clown, Mayer was speechless, pretending that he couldn't understand what he said. If he provokes someone else's provocation first, the bandit is at this level. Then let's see how the brat beat you to tears. Meyer's eyes darkened a bit, and the smile that leaked out was also a little gloomy, and then rushed behind the strong man, slamming an elbow on the man's back. Strong man didn't react for a while, he choked after being hit, and then fell directly to the ground. The body of a strong man is not small, and it is even more ridiculous to fall like this. Not only Meyer and the audience wanted to laugh, but even the strong man's subordinates couldn't help laughing when they saw the strong man fall to the ground with his face turned upside down. 917. Painful Bandit. Strong man was ridiculed by so many people, so he couldn't keep his face down. When he stood up from the ground, his face was full of yuhi, and his resentment towards Meyer couldn't help but increase a bit. What are you laughing at? Grab a sword for Lao Su. The strong man looked at his subordinates who were trying to hold back their laughter, and when he was angry, he patted the dust on his buttocks, and his subordinates shouted. Frightened that they couldn't laugh anymore when the strong man shouted, and they all stretched out their hands to grab the sword from Gong Yi's waist. He was perfectly avoided by Gong Yi, not to mention grabbing the sword, not even touching the scabbard. It's not bad to give you a try. Gong Yi looked at everyone's eyes on his sword, couldn't help chuckling, and said. Anyway, he just got this sword, and he doesn't know how it feels, so it's not bad to try it here. Then, Meyer took the sword out of the scabbard, and after waving it a few times, shuttled through the crowd at a fast speed. After a few seconds, the bandits under the stage fell down, and only a strong man was left standing. Meyer deliberately did not directly kill them. A while, the power of this sword was also seen by everyone. Looking at the power of this sword, those who didn't grab it, or didn't have the chance to take the stage, felt a pity. But Meyer's skills were a little too strong, so that everyone did not dare to snatch it openly. This bandit can also be said to have great courage. How about it? The little brat can scare you and cry. Meyer inserted a sword into the bandit's neck. As long as he moved a little, the bandit would snap off immediately. However, this development undoubtedly frightened the bandit. He did not expect such a powerful person to hide in this auction. It's wrong, big brother, it's our fault, we shouldn't come to grab the sword and make us confused. The strong man's face was directed to the ground, and he apologized to Meyer in various ways, for fear that Meyer would be rude to him. Host, it's over to you. Meyer has nothing to say about this kind of bandit, and said to the host. Host nodded, smiled and waved to the back, signaling the people below to come over. Then, a few men came out from behind the stage, apparently the bodyguards of the auction house. Go grab that man and send it there. The host waved his hand and asked the bodyguard to do it. Bodyguard just bowed, then walked by tacitly agreed, took the bandit in Yi's hand, and then threw it aside. Let's make everyone laugh, then this auction, we will complete the end of the auction, please come to the backstage to collect the goods. After the bandit was caught, the rest of the guards also cleaned up the fallen bandit in front of the door, and after telling everyone in the audience, the yuhi curtain fell, and the lights in the auction hall turned on. The people who were quiet at first also began to chat for a while. People who know each other greet each other, and people who don't know each other casually drag people to know. Just a moment. In this auction house are basically among the best, and it is only beneficial if they are handed over. Move Adam back first, then let's go buy a wave of furniture and ingredients. Backstage, looking at the huge Adam, Gong Yi said. They can't always go shopping with such a big thing. The rest of the people also nodded their heads and had no opinion. Afterwards, a few people moved Adam up and prepared to go back. However, before they could go out, they were stopped by someone. What? Ask your name. In front of Gong Yi, and the others glanced at Gong Yi behind him and said. Gong Yi was also patted by Meyer next to him, only then did he realize that the man was talking about him. My name is Gong Yi. Although Gong Yi didn't know why, he politely replied. The man looked at Gong Yi's perfunctory greeting, neither angry nor complaining, but just smiled for unknown reasons. I don't know if it was his delusion or not, but he always felt that Gong Yi was a very interesting person. My name is Saga Yuga, and there will be an appointment in the future. The man looked at Gong Yi, smiled, then waved at Gong Yi and left. Gong Yi looked at Saga Yuga's hand to say goodbye to them, and was very interested in the tattoo on his arm. That tattoo, it's quite individual. But Gong Yi didn't take it to heart. The inexplicable words of this inexplicable person, he hugged Adam and left the auction house. After reaching dock number 49, Rayleigh asked Gong Yi and Mayer to move Adam down, and Mayer and Gong Yi did so. Next, Mayer and Riley went to work on Adam's trunk and came to take a boat. Lanying and Shachi handled the fruit and leaves, while Gong Yi squatted on the side and drew the design drawings. But he didn't know anything about the sketch of the ship, and he couldn't understand the sketch of the ship at all. Desperation, he could only draw a rough outline, using words and annotations on the side. Although he said that he could replicate Mayer's ability to build ships, after all, he was not very familiar with Mayer's power, and the things he built were naturally not as good as Mayer's. Although it is very troublesome to draw sketches, Gong Yi still chooses to continue to draw. 918. Farewell, third more. About an hour later, Mayer and Riley finished processing Adam's trunk first, followed by Blue Cherry finishing the leaves and fruit. The rest, only Gong Yi himself completed every time. As for the design of the new boat, Gong Yi is still a little bit tangled up in one place. Lanying and the others were not in a hurry, they sat aside and waited for Gong Yi to finish. Finally, after another half an hour, Gong Yi's sketch was finally finished. After Gong Yi finished designing the sketch, he handed it over to Mayer, who couldn't help twitching at the corner of his mouth when he looked at the crooked drawing. Fortunately, there is Gong Yi's text and comments next to it, otherwise he will probably make Gong Yi's lovely idea scrapped. Mayer looked at the sketches, got a general understanding, and had a serious look in his mind, and then listed the things he wanted to buy on a piece of paper. Next, the three of them will go out to buy. Originally, Gong Yi was going to split his troops into 3 lanes, but because of the Tianlong people, it can be said that the matter of splitting troops into 3 lanes was completely opposed by Mayer. Gong Yi couldn't beat Mayer, so the 3 of them acted together. Fortunately, there was nothing wrong with this purchase. 2 hours later, they all returned to dock number 49 with a lot of bubbles in their hands. Gong Yi looked at the bubbles in his hand and couldn't help but sigh. Fortunately there are these bubbles in the Chambord Islands, otherwise, if I bought so many things, I don't know how many times I would have to carry them back and forth. After the 49th dock, Gong Yi burst the bubbles one by one, and the objects in the bubbles fell to the ground one by one, almost piled up into a hill. Let's get started. Gong Yi counted the things he needed, and when he confirmed it was correct, he looked at Mayer and nodded, saying that it's okay. Mayer also nodded, then looked at the sea, put his hand into the water, and began to read his skills in his mouth, and then the sea began to glow. I saw the trunk of the Adam tree, as well as furniture, food, and the fruit of the Adam tree, all flew to the sea one by one, and slowly they were assembled into a small boat. The size of this boat, I am afraid it is about to compete with that ship, but it is still smaller than that. Because Gong Yi has more requirements, the design that Gong Yi wants is only available for such a large ship. But such a big ship, only they go up and sail, it is too spacious, it seems that a lot of people will be added in the future. When the ship was fully completed, and at night, Rayleigh did not let them sail directly, but left them here for the last night, leaving tomorrow morning. This farewell, Gong Yi didn't know how long it would take him to see Rayleigh again, so he agreed to Rayleigh's request. After dinner, Gong Yi stood in front of the door, looking at the moon above, and unknowingly, he had been here for several years. Bit jerky at the beginning, he was very happy to see that everything was on track now. Gong Yi is also a little sorry for Luffy, the original male protagonist of One Piece. After all, after Gong Yi came, Gong Yi's became the real male protagonist here, and Luffy would be slowly deluded. It's a pity that Luffy's One Piece dream will be cut off by him. Was in the world of Hokage, he also broke Naruto's dream, which is really ashamed. But ashamed to be ashamed, he will not let out the seat that should not be let go. Now that you have come, you can't come in vain. Naturally, you must be the same as when you were in Hokage, and become the ultimate winner. But One Piece and Hokage ninja are different after all, and the difficulty is also very different. If you want to become the ultimate winner here, it is much more difficult than in Hokage. I'm leaving tomorrow, are you still sleeping? Just when Gong Yi was tangled, they were suddenly opened, and it was Rayleigh who came out. Teacher. Speaking of leaving tomorrow, Gong Yi's heart became mixed. Unconsciously, he and Rayleigh stayed together for longer and longer, so that it was a little unacceptable to leave suddenly now. Rayleigh can also see Gong Yi's feelings. I'll see you again. I hope that when I see you next time, you and Luffy can become men on their own. Riley stroked his beard, looked at Gong Yi, and said. Gong Yi could understand Rayleigh's words. Until the next time we meet again, it will be the day of the decisive battle between him and Luffy. As the original protagonist of One Piece, the one who will have a decisive battle with Gong Yi will be Luffy 100%. But he didn't panic, although he said that Luffy's talent and ability are very strong, but he is not bad. He will work hard to surpass Luffy's bounty, surpass Luffy's fame, and surpass Luffy's strength. Teacher, we will not disappoint you until the next time we meet. Gong Yi smiled and said. Rayleigh also nodded, expressing his belief in Gong Yi's words. Don't forget what you promised me to protect Lanying. Rayleigh looked at Gong Yi again and said. For Gong Yi and Luffy, he is not worried, but more worried about Lanying. 919. Visit the ship. In this way, Gong Yi and others spent their last night at Rayleigh's house. Probably because of reluctance, I hardly slept well all night and woke up very early the next day. When Gong Yi woke up, Rayleigh, Mayor and Lanying were all awake and waiting for him. Originally, Gong Yi thought he was the one who couldn't sleep the most, but from the dark circles under Lanying and Mayor's eyes, it seemed that there were people who were more reluctant than him. After breakfast, let's go to sea. This record pointer is for you. You are about to enter the new world ahead. I will bring you a copy of 3 feet S of this kind. I hope you can find the navigator as soon as possible, otherwise in the new world inside, it's a little tricky. Rayleigh handed his record pointer to Gong Yi and said with a smile. Gong Yi nodded, thanked him, and sat down as well, began to eat dinner. This is the last time they ate together, and the next time, I don't know when it will be. After eating, Gong Yi and others packed up and got on the boat. Boy, don't forget to promise me something. Before leaving, Rayleigh shouted at Gong Yi. He couldn't even remember how many times this was the first time he had reminded Gong Yi, but he was just not at ease. After all, that was the only thing she cared about after her best friend died. Understood, teacher, I must live up to my trust. Gong Yi smiled and gave Riley a thumbs up, expressing that he would do what he said. Seeing Gong Yi's promise, Rayleigh nodded in satisfaction and waved goodbye to them. I don't know what Gong Yi will grow into. I think it will shine even more than Luffy. With just one action, he became the 12th supernova of the exception, a greater achievement than anyone else. After saying goodbye to Rayleigh and Shachi, Gong Yi drove the boat on the road. Because they don't have navigators, sailing on this great route is still a little scary. For sailing, Lanying knows a little bit, but only a little bit, so that they won't run amok at sea, but they won't be able to deal with emergencies. Gong Yi, I want to see this. Ship was on the right track. Lanying ran to Gong Yi's side, looking at the big ship, her eyes couldn't stop shining. I want to see it too, after all, I only know about it. Mayor came over and said he was curious too. Although the ship was built by Mayor, he only knew a rough idea. If he wanted to observe the ship carefully, he he undoubtedly had to rely on Gong Yi. Good. Gong Yi nodded, ready to take Mayor and Lan Ying to visit the ship. Of this ship is that he has improved it from the inside of Hokage and some modern buildings. He is also a time traveler, and what he knows is naturally very advanced. First, Gong Yi led Lan Ying and Mayor into the kitchen. In the kitchen, there is a double-layer refrigerator, but because of the sea, the cooking place and the cabinets still imitate the Wanli sunshine. But the place to drink water is different, it is an improved version of the modern water dispenser. Because there is no shortage of plastic here, so he drew the water dispenser, but he didn't expect it to actually be installed. But because there are no modern plastic buckets here, the buckets on the water dispenser can only be replaced by wooden buckets, but it is also convenient to take water in this way. Lan Ying and Mayor were curious about the manufacturing principle of this water dispenser, and Gong Yi explained it to them. Lan Ying and Mayor are also very envious of Gong Yi. SIQ, Gong Yi is also scratching his head in embarrassment. Anyway, there is no water dispenser at this time, so let's pretend it was designed by himself. Then, I went to the food storage room. The food storage room is in the form of a cellar. There is no sunlight to ensure a low temperature, and the saved food is spoiled. The most surprising thing is the treasure storage room and the cage. Treasure storage room, undoubtedly for storing treasures, is in the form of a modern safe, and the outside is covered with a layer of wood, so that even if they are not there, it is impossible for anyone to get the money inside. So when they get off the boat and take risks, it is also very safe. The leisure room is undoubtedly the same as Luffy's ship. There is a fish tank to store the fish, and it can also be used for appreciation. But the difference between his lounge and the Rhodes spaceship is that it can automatically catch fish. They put the most irresistible temptation for sea creatures on the upper mouth, which is very convenient to catch. Next, there's that extra large bottom cage. The cage was at the bottom of the boat, which was surprising. As soon as Mayor touched it, he was completely exhausted. Only then did he realize that the cage was originally made of Heilu stone, not just the door, even the floor, walls, and ceiling inside were all Heilushi, and there was a net with Heilushi inside. In this way, if they capture someone alive, that is, an immortal, I am afraid they won't be able to escape. The rest of the places, Gong Yi also introduced them one by one. The ship is divided into 4 tiers, each with its own characteristics. 920. Sudden shipwreck. In this way, it is understandable why this ship is so big. After all, it is a 4-story ship, so it is not surprising that it is not big. The bottom floor is a variety of storage rooms and dungeons, and the third is a place to sleep. If there are more people in the future, they can all be stuffed in the 3rd floor. The 2nd floor are various rooms, library, medical room, etc. The senior officers on the ship, such as Mayor and Lan Ying, all sleep on the 2nd floor. Before Gong Yi crossed over, his knowledge of One Piece was not 1.5 stars, so now adding together what he thinks is excellent, it can be said to be perfect. Because the boat was so big, they watched it for 20 minutes before finishing it. After reading it, a few people sat on the deck with great joy. For this ship, they can be said to be downright admirable, no matter of shape and function. This is the most perfect boat they have ever seen. By the way, Gong Yi, what's the name of our ship? After sitting down and basking in the sun for a while, Lan Ying looked at Gong Yi and asked. Such a good ship, of course, needs a perfect name. The name, the Fire. After all, the pirates are called the Fire Pirates. Gong Yi looked up at the pirate flag and said. Whenever I see this pirate flag, Gong Yi can think of Ace. It was the first and last time he had contact with Ace. His feelings for Ace were very complicated, and he couldn't tell what kind of feelings they were. He didn't know why this happened. This pirate group can be said to be the incarnation of Ace. It is his nostalgia for Ace. He hopes to continue to walk with Ace's share. Not bad, Agni. Lan Ying saw the complicated expression in Gong Yi, expression, didn't ask more, just smiled. Mayer also nodded together. Gong Yi also smiled. In this way, the three of them started to drive towards the island. They don't know where they will go next, but as long as they follow the record pointer, there should be no problem. However, just as the three of them were about to eat lunch, something bad suddenly happened. I saw that the originally clear sky turned dark for a while, and it started to rain. And the originally calm sea began to rise. Standing on the boat, one of them couldn't find their center of gravity and started to sway on the boat. What happened all of a sudden? Lan Ying was swaying on the boat, trying to find a way to stand still, but she was still unable to stand, so she couldn't help grabbing the pole of the sail and asked Gong Yi. I don't know why it happened all of a sudden. Gong Yi is also not clear about Lan Ying's question. He is completely ignorant of sailing, and even if you ask him about this kind of thing, he doesn't know. Mayer, what about you, do you know? When Gong Yi couldn't solve it on his own, he started throwing questioning glances at Mayer. Now he and Lan Ying don't know, the only one that can be counted on is Mayer. I don't know sailing either. Mayer leaned against the boat, trying to grab where he could be fixed, and said. At this moment, Gong Yi was really worried to a certain extent. Sure enough, they should find a navigator to take them with them in the Chambord Islands. Now I have a problem, and the 3-3C idiots can't solve it, which is really worrying. Waves. Lan Ying, let the boat dodge. Just when Gong Yi was not at a loss, I saw a big wave suddenly hit the other side of the sea, which made Gong Yi, who was already anxious, panic instantly, and said to Lan Ying. Although Lan Ying doesn't know much about sailing, at least she can sail, so the only person who can count on it now is Lan Ying. I see. Gong Yi's words. Lan Ying nodded and wanted to go over. However, the boat was shaking so badly that Lan Ying had just let go. The pole of the sail was swaying and fell to the deck. When Lan Ying stood up again, it was too late, and the waves were right in front of her. Quick, go to the second floor. Seeing that the waves were about to come, it was too late to control the boat to escape, so I could only go to the second floor to hide. The boat is made of Adam's tree trunk, and it is very sturdy. Naturally, there is no need to doubt its sturdiness. In addition, the hull is huge, and a wave cannot overturn the boat. So now they just have to make sure they don't get shot in the sea. After all, among the three of them, two of them are capable people. If they want to fall, then how Lan Ying and Mayer nodded. Then Mayer stood up, dragged the fallen Lan Ying, and ran to the second floor, halfway through. Also fell once. But the waves were right in front of me, and there was nothing I could do if I fell, so I jumped to the second floor with Lan Ying's clothes. However, Gong Yi is not so lucky. Lan Ying and Mayer reached the second floor, the waves came over. Gong Yi didn't have time to go in. Seeing that the waves were about to fall, Gong Yi used a little arrogance to close the door from the deck to the second floor. If seawater gets into the boat, it will be completely useless. Then the waves fell. Gong Yi, who had no time to escape, was also hit by the waves, and then became unable to breathe.